Bring in CNN Global Affairs analyst Kimberly Dozier and Joel Rubin, who worked in the Obama State Department. Thank you both. Secretary Blinken travels to the region and travels to Israel at a time when he is certainly aware that the administration is facing a lot of pressure in terms of what's happening in Gaza and the humanitarian toll. I want to play for you a clip of what we just heard from him a short time ago and then ask you a question on the other side.
As democracies, the United States, Israel, other democracies have a responsibility to do everything possible to protect civilians who may be caught in harm's way. And this, again, is a crossfire, quite literally, of Hamas's making. This is something that the United States is committed to. I'm not going to get into the details here, but it's very much on the agenda. When I see a Palestinian child, a boy, a girl, pulled from the rubble of a collapsed building, that hits me in the gut as much as seeing a child in Israel or anywhere else.
So, Kim, of course, I mean, it's what officials will say publicly, but then also what they might be saying privately. What do you think Blinken and the new ambassador Liu are telling their Israeli counterparts, perhaps behind the scenes once they get on the ground?
Well, I think Blinken just gave his Israeli hosts a preview. I think he's going to be pushing for a humanitarian pause, as President Biden mentioned to a heckler at an event yesterday. I don't think the president would have said that out loud without having it on his mind. And I think the White House was thinking about that anyway. We can all see the humanitarian crisis, and the more that goes on, combined with the civilian casualties, the harder it's going to make it for the Biden administration to support Israel. On the civilian casualties issue, we're seeing the kind of strikes that I've never seen the Israelis make, for instance, inside the West Bank. Now, some of the severity of the strikes might be attributed to, for instance, the tunnel system and that causing more damage than the battle planners expected, but it doesn't matter to the Arab world that's watching this. And I think Blinken's going to say, get your foot off the gas and take more care with your strikes.
Joel, it's interesting to hear Kim there say that perhaps the president wouldn't have made that comment if he hadn't been sort of heckled in that way. How do you think the president's comments that he believes that there should be some sort of humanitarian pause, how do you think that's going to be received?
Well, Rahel, I think that the president, he's been saying this for more than just the heckling. I think he did respond as he should have. President Biden throughout, even in the supplemental funding request, asked for aid from Congress to support Palestinians from humanitarian assistance. So he's going to keep on pushing. I think that the Israeli government has to listen. President Biden is providing political support for Israel, military support, ensuring that he's letting Iran know not to get involved and not engaged. And he has tremendous support inside Israel's public in the population. And that's leverage that he has. And clearly he wants to spend it a little bit and try to find a way to get Israel to give some time for the Palestinians to take care, but also not too much time to allow Hamas to sort of regroup. And that's the real tension point here. And that's why they're calling for a pause and certainly not for a ceasefire at this stage.
Joel, as you point out, I mean, the U.S. certainly has the leverage, but do you think that there is a point and that we could be approaching it as these pictures and these videos out of Gaza continue to come in? Is there a point in which you see Israel losing U.S. support?
Well, Rahel, the pictures are horrifying, and I'm glad that Secretary Blinken spoke to that. And as we saw a couple of years ago, when Hamas and Israel had a fight, after about 5 or 6 days, President Biden tapped on the brakes and asked for it to slow down and cease. I don't think we're going to see a loss of American support for Israel, but when there are attacks that kill the kinds of civilian numbers that we just saw, that really eliminates much of the space that President Biden has to continue to support Israel unconditionally. There's a very practical part, in addition to the grave human rights consequences of killing so many civilians. On a practical level, it's crucial that Israel maintain the American support and broader international support. We've already seen whispers from Bahrain, who made a normalization with Israel recently, a couple of years ago, pulling back their ambassador. Israel can't have that kind of dynamic take hold, and that's why they need to take care of the civilian impact aggressively and immediately.
Kim, let me ask you about this new reporting from Katie Bowe. I'm not sure if you heard our correspondent just there talking about the new U.S. intelligence assessment. You and I have talked about this before.
I read her story.
It was a good story. It was a really good story. Let me ask, because you and I have talked about this before as well, but the assessment now that the U.S. believes that Iran does not want this to spread beyond, it wants to sort of contain this. One, does that square with what you are hearing from your contacts and from your sources?
It does, and it also squares with what we're seeing. We've seen, yes, a lot of harassing attacks along the northern border with Israel, but we haven't seen Hezbollah unleash its sophisticated missiles stocks that can hit every part of Israel if it so chooses. What we're going to hear from the leader Hassan Nasrallah in his Friday speech, since he hasn't spoken since the October 7th attacks, could show us, does he feel pushed to respond, or is it just going to be fiery, condemnatory, and they'll stay satisfied with the damage that this is doing to Israel and the U.S. reputationally without having to risk an all-out war with Israel armed with nuclear weapons?
Joel, let me let you have the final question here. The issue of hostages. I mean, the foreign nationals getting out of Rafah crossing, of course, is just, it's a huge development, but it doesn't speak to the other side of this, which is what is happening with negotiations with the hostages. I mean, anything you can share in terms of, I mean, diplomatically, does it lend some optimism that those conversations are happening? I mean, what do you make of it?
Yeah, certainly there's always hope when there are ongoing negotiations, and Qatar and Egypt have been active in this space with Israel, clearly working with the United States. And I think that's also an important point to make here, Rahel, which is that Israeli public opinion is very much with freeing the hostages, very concerned about taking operations to a level where the hostages are sacrificed, quite bluntly put. And so there may be support politically inside Israel for a pause if that can be coupled with hostage release. We've seen the United States get engaged in supporting technically Israel as it surveils and tries to identify, and it did rescue one hostage. But that may be the contours of some kind of an arrangement. Hopefully Secretary Blinken, when he's out there, he's going to talk to all these parties. He has been consistently, but try to find a deal where there's a way to spring hostages for humanitarian benefit for the Palestinians. That may be something to be looking at in the days ahead.